You're welcome to my channel. My name is Akinwale Akindia. I want you to press the subscribe button so that you can get more videos from me later on. In this video, I want to look at risk, crisis, and disaster. This topic is very important in these days of environmental, climate challenges, COVID-19, pandemic all over the world. The world globally is just recovering from the lockdown that was imposed on us by the uh, pandemic challenges. And unfortunately, so many people have died because of this pandemic, and the world is still grappling with the effects of this pandemic on all fronts. And incidentally, that is not the only challenge that the world is facing. So many places of the world right now, there are wars, there are conflicts, tensions, okay, farming. Uh, Look at the challenge in Texas, okay. So environmental, natural, man-made crises and disasters are all over the place, and that is why we need to have knowledge of the risk, crisis, and disaster. So, what is risk? Risk is the potential for uncontrolled loss of something of value. The probability or threat of damage, injury, liability, loss, or any other negative occurrence that is caused by external or internal vulnerabilities and that may be avoided through preemptive action. And that is the good news about risk is that a lot of these incidents that could cause loss could actually be prevented if we have done a thorough risk assessment earlier, and we have done analysis of our vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities are weaknesses in an organization, weaknesses in an environment, the community, in the nation that can expose that entity to damage or injury. So risk is basically the potential for uncontrolled loss of something of value. So it means before you can do risk analysis, risk assessment, risk management, the first thing is actually to determine what is your value. So for a business, you need to determine your value. What what defines value for the organization? Okay, for a country, what defines value? Of course, you know that human life is the highest level of asset. So in risk management, we always revolve our critical risk management efforts around the preservation of the human life. Okay, so according to the International Risk Management Principles and Guidelines Standard, ISO 21000, that is the standard, the ISO standard of risk management. Risk is defined as effect of uncertainty on objectives. So, like I said, the objectives are what we first define, either for a country, for a community, for an organization. We need to first define what are our objectives, and that objective is now what we will now be looking at as regard what are the risks, what are the events, the incidents that can happen that can hinder us from achieving those objectives. So risk is a neutral term. Risk could be positive, it could be negative. Okay, even though most of the time we look at risk from a negative perspective, but also you have positive risk in that if you take certain decisions, okay, you might be able to get certain benefits which otherwise you would not have obtained. Okay, so in risk uh, analysis, we need to look at the threats, then we need to look at the opportunities. So the opportunities, if taken advantage of, can give us positive risk. Then the threats, if they expect our vulnerability, they can result in negative risk. So the first aspect of the risk management process is establishing the context, which I have said. So we need to know basically what is our focus: human life, profit, revenue, uh, expense minimization, welfare of people. So we need to know the objective, the context we are looking at. So ISO 31000 defines risk management as coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regard to risk. So if we know what risk is, so what is risk management? It is coordinated. So it is not adversarial. It's not unsystematic. It's directed. It's controlled. It's managed. So we have managed activities which are meant to reduce risk to an acceptable level. Now, so you look at this diagram. This is one of the most comprehensive diagram on risk management process. So to start with what? Establishing the context. You need to know why we are here. Why are we talking risk? What is at risk? What are we protecting? So we need to define that. Then once we define that, we need to now move to risk assessment. Risk assessment is a compound word, okay? Including risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. Those three things make up risk assessment. So risk identification, we need to be able to identify the risk, either internal risk or external risk. So take, for example, take a bank, for example. What are the risks in that to run a bank? For example, you have a credit risk. It's a risk that you give money out and the money is going to come back. You have operational risk. That could be IT failure, system failure, okay, server breakdown. So all these can affect your operation. There is fraud risk. There's a risk that your employees can collude with, among themselves and outsiders to defraud the bank. Okay, there's regulatory risk. The central bank can, fine you, penalize you, or even withdraw your license. So you need. So risks they are terrain specific, they are organization specific, they are entity specific. So we need to be able to identify the risk that the business, the country, or the individual is exposed to. Then we now, after identifying the risk, we move to risk analysis. So we now try to understand the risks. Okay, risk of fire. What is the impact? What is the likely impact? What is the likely frequency? What is even the probability? So because you may have a risk, it might never happen, may never crystallize, and it may crystallize now. Okay, so what is the so in risk analysis, we are trying to have an understanding of that risk, and we can do that qualitatively using descriptive ranking, high risk, low risk, medium risk. We can do that quantitatively, giving us a dollar value, a quantitative value of risk or value of the asset multiplied by probability of the event, and we can give you a dollar estimate, a dollar amount of the risk you are exposed to. Annual loss expectancy can tell you in naira value, in dollar value, how much you are exposed to in terms of loss in a year. That is what annual loss expectancy calculations can give you. So in risk analysis, you want to know the probability, you want to know the impact, you want to know the frequency of that risk crystallizing. Then we now move to risk evaluation. So in risk evaluation, you need to have a benchmark, a threshold, okay, which is called risk appetite. So your risk appetite is already defined. Now, from the result of the risk analysis, you now compare the result of the risk analysis with your defined threshold, your defined risk appetite. So based on the results of the comparison, you now decide whether the risk is something you can ignore or something you cannot ignore. So for example, your risk appetite is, let's say, $100,000. And during risk analysis calculations, you have discovered that this risk is worth $300,000. What that means is that it is beyond what you can ignore. You cannot accept a risk like that. You have to treat it to reduce that risk to an acceptable or a residual level. So once you have done your risk evaluation, then you now move to risk treatment. So in risk treatment, there are four ways to actually treat a risk or respond to a risk. You have risk avoidance. Risk avoidance means you close down the process or you will not initiate a process that will generate the risk. That is risk avoidance. Okay? Then you have a risk acceptance, which means that risk is okay with you. Your residual risk is $100,000, but this particular risk is $30,000. After you have done your risk analysis, okay, my residual risk level is $100,000. My this risk is $30,000. That is not even up to my asset level at the residual risk level. So because of that, I can accept it. So I don't need to implement any control as regard that risk. That is risk acceptance. You have a risk transfer. So in risk transfer, you transfer the risk to an insurance company, okay, to another organization through payment of premium. Then you have also have risk mitigation. Okay, so in risk mitigation, you apply controls and countermeasures. So maybe you can use application controls, input controls, output controls, processing controls, preventive controls, effective controls, corrective controls. So you bring a amount of controls to bring that risk down to a level that is acceptable to the organization. And look at it at the right side, you always have monitoring and review. So monitoring and review continuously go on throughout the entire process, from establishing the context to risk assessment to risk treatment. You need to have a system uh, that will help you to be monitoring the external environment, internal environment. New risks may be emerging, current risks may be evolving, so you need to be checking those. Then, of course, communication. Is also very, very important. Communication and consultation at the left hand. So just like you have monitoring and review at the right hand, we have communication and consultation at the left hand, which must continue throughout the entire process. From establishing the context to risk treatment, you must continually communicate. Anybody can identify risks, anybody can discover new risks. So if you don't have a process for open discussion, open consultation, then those risks might crystallize before you start responding to them. That is why communication is very, very key in risk management. So there are risk management concepts we are supposed to be familiar with. We have risk appetite, we have residual risk, we have a risk tolerance. Okay, we also have a risk capacity. So risk capacity is the level of risk the company can afford to be subjected to in the pursuit of business objective. Okay, so you can lose $10 million in the pursuit of business objective. You have the shock, the balance sheet can absorb that loss. But that does not mean you are willing to suffer such a loss. So the loss you are willing to suffer in the process of pursuing your business objective is what we call the residual risk. What we call residual risk for acceptable level of risk. And the residual risk is tied to the risk appetite. So the risk appetite is going to be defined by the board of directors, the executives. So they could be risk averse, they could be risk takers. So that will determine what the residual risk is going to be. Then we have the risk tolerance. So risk tolerance is the level of risk above the risk appetite which the organization is still willing to accept. So our risk appetite, risk acceptable level of risk is $100,000. You can play around that $100,000. What about if the business comes around and the our risk level to that business is around the $15,000? A man still says go ahead. Okay, $15,000 above our residual risk level is still okay with us. That is what we mean by risk tolerance. Okay, so that is that with risk. So if risk is not well handled, you didn't identify it or you didn't analyze it thoroughly, or you didn't treat it very well, it can escalate into a crisis. Okay, so a crisis is from the Greek word crisis. So a crisis is any event that is going or is expected to lead to an unstable and dangerous situation affecting an individual, group, community, or whole society. So crises are negative changes in the security, economic, political, societal, environmental affairs, especially when they occur abruptly with little or no warning. So basically, the first stage in any crisis is what they call the warning stage. And that warning stage, the duration could be short or long. So there are some crises that may be coming, okay, and we're already showing you signs that, oh, this crisis is brewing. The signs are already there. But there are some that maybe an earthquake can just happen suddenly without little or no warning. But a lot of time, crisis will actually be predicted, especially from the release phase. Now I said, crisis will originate from risk. So it's when you didn't deal with the risk appropriately that the risk can become a crisis in your hand. Okay, so a crisis is a time of intense difficulty, a danger for the business. Look at the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 crisis when batteries started exploding while in use. So that was a crisis for the organization at that time. So three elements attributed to a crisis. Number one, a crisis is a threat to the business. There is always the element of surprise too, especially where the warning stage is very limited, like I said earlier. Then you have a short decision time, and that's why you need to have crisis management plan before the crisis, because in the middle of the crisis, you have to make decisions that sometimes will even have fatal consequences. People may die because of wrong decisions made in the middle of the crisis. So you need to have a plan before that crisis. Profile of a crisis manager. A crisis manager should be a subject matter expert. So if there's a crisis, you need to have somebody on ground that knows the context end to end. Then a crisis manager should be a team player because you need people from various subject matter expertise. So you need to be able to relate with everybody, get information, get support, get have resources. Then a crisis manager should be a pressure manager. You should be able to handle stress, be able to make decisions under pressure. When men are quaking, when knees are buckling, they are standing strong there, knowing what is at stake, you know what to do. Then a crisis manager should be a communication specialist. You need to be able to talk, you need to communicate, you need to be able to win people over with superior arguments. Okay? Then a crisis manager should be somebody that has attention to detail, be very thorough, be able to look at events and determine the weak link, be able to determine the vulnerabilities that led to the crisis, be able to know what to do, all right, in the middle of a crisis. So then, new nature of crisis. Crises now are evolving. Now with the social media, something that you think will happen, maybe in Nigeria locally before you know it has become a global news. Okay, something happened in Texas, then you see a TV station in Australia discussing it. So these are new nature uh, of crisis. So you have unexpected circumstances happening. Okay, so we have crisis now happening on large scale. We have community crisis being spread all over a country, all over a region. Okay, and some of these crises are new, they are unprecedented. Okay, they are not something you have track. You can say, okay, that's happened somewhere before. So you're having new crises that are just emerging. Look at what happened in Japan some years ago. They had a earthquake, tsunami, and a nuclear plant problem at the same time. Three level of crisis, combining together. How do you manage that? In fact, I think the Prime Minister had to resign at the point in time. So you have unprecedented level of crisis. Okay, then you have a transboundary nature of crisis. So you have crisis spreading across. So something will happen there will be a challenge in Ethiopia. Okay, that's the challenge that needs to that. So these are the new nature of crisis that we have. You have a pandemic originating in China, from there it has gone around the whole world. So these are new nature of crisis. Okay, the crisis communication is very important. You need to be able to manage internal communication. In a crisis, there are some information that must not go out. So you need to be able to manage your people. External communication is also very important. There are some things you cannot afford to say. So whoever is going to communicate externally must be designated, must be trained, must be certified. Okay, the person must be somebody that is already groomed in that area, and most likely the communication should be written down. You should not be talking outside because you don't want to say something that will put fire in the crisis. Okay? Then you should be able to collaborate and communicate to assess the risk. The information management is very key. So you need to have an internal crisis communication plan. People should know what to do. You should not just be working ad hoc when there's a crisis. There must be a template to follow. Now, if a crisis too is not well managed, it can explode into a disaster, a full-blown disaster. So disaster is from the French word disaster, okay, which is a combination of two words, death meaning bad, earthquake meaning star. So when we are talking about disaster, we're talking about bad or evil star. So something happened in under a bad event, a bad omen. Okay, so disaster is a serious disruption in the functioning of the community or the society, causing widespread material, economic, social, or environmental losses, which exceed the ability of the affected society to cope using its own resources. So before you can call something a disaster, it means the crisis has gone to a level whereby the company, the business, the community, the country can no longer handle it on its own. So they will need external help. So the it has exceeded the capacity of adjustment of the affected community or entity. And the agreement basically by experts is that if people are not affected, they are yet to have a disaster. So it's people that matter most. Like I said, without people, there is no disaster. Okay. We also have emergency. Emergency is a state in which normal procedures are suspended and extraordinary measures are taken in order to avoid a disaster. So in between crisis and disaster, we have emergency. And but the good news about emergency is that even though the situation is bad, the local resources can still be used to contain it. So it is when the local resources are overwhelmed that an emergency can become a disaster. Okay, we have hazard. Hazard is a natural or human-made event that threatens to adversely affect human life, property, or activity to the extent of causing a disaster. Vulnerability, I've explained that before, is weaknesses that can lead to exposure to danger. So vulnerabilities, you can have poverty. Poverty in a community. So vulnerability, limited access to power structure, resources, ideology can become a disaster. So belief system can lead to a disaster. Okay, economic systems, age, sex, illness, disability, all these can lead to disasters if not well managed. Lack of local institutions. So where you have individuals being stronger than the institutions. That could be a vulnerability. Lack of education, lack of training, lack of skills, lack of local investment, local market, lack of service, lack of press freedom. All these are vulnerabilities. Population expansion can be a vulnerability leading to poverty if not well managed. Uncontrolled urbanization, environmental degradation, all these will be vulnerabilities that can lead to disasters later on. Then you have unsafe conditions, fragile physical environment, dangerous location, dangerous buildings, fragile local economy, low levels of income, livelihoods at risk, public actions. All these are vulnerabilities that can lead to disaster. So when hazards and vulnerability meet, then we are going to have a problem, going to have a disaster. So a lot of time in emergency preparedness or disaster preparedness, we focus a lot on the vulnerability. Because if you don't have vulnerabilities, even if unexpected hazard happens, you'll be able to contain it, okay, on time, compared to where there are vulnerabilities that can exacerbate the impact of the hazard. So hazard trigger events, earthquake will happen, like it happened in Japan, high winds, storm, floods, landslide, volcanic eruption, drought, war, civil strife, economic crisis, technological accidents. Okay, uh, all these are trigger events that can lead to a disaster. So in disaster management, we want to prevent, if possible, the potential losses of hazard. So you keep on preparing, working on your vulnerability, strengthening your vulnerability so that they become less likely to be what you expose you to hazard. Okay, so you can prevent the hazard from happening, especially man-made hazard. For example, communal clashes, we are seeing signs being the peace and conflict management expert, down detention. Okay, so we have prevented that. And if you cannot prevent the hazard from happening, you can reduce the impact of losses from hazard. Okay, then you can ensure prompt and appropriate assistance to victims when necessary. Then also achieve rapid and effective recovery after disaster has ended. So, to build capacity for emergency management, you need information. You need to know your risk. You need to know what to do about the risk. So information is very important. We also need authority. We need power to act before this disaster strikes, even during disaster uh, uh, in events. People must have authority to make decisions. We need institutions, strong institutions. Okay, so you have the NEMA, you have the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of the Disaster Management, and so on and so forth. So you need to have, institutions, NGOs, federal and state organizations, uh, private sector-led institutions, and the rest to be able to manage these emergencies. Then you need partnership with international organizations, IFC, World Health Organization, UNICEF, UNDP, and so on and so forth. So these partnerships are very, very important. Then you need plans, you need emergency response plan, business continuity plan, you need resources, you need procedures to activate this plan. So the essence of this lecture is to focus on risk. Like I said, identify your risk so that they don't become a crisis. Manage your crisis so that they don't become disaster. So once again, my name is Akinwale Akinbiya. Please subscribe to my channel so that you can get more education.